She carried a secret as fragile as the voice that asked for help, and a man who had everything but knew nothing would need to choose between power and the truth that would change everything. The Malibu sky was tinged with orange hues as the final preparations for the inauguration of the newest resort in the Ocean View Group were being completed. Warm lights surrounded the gardens, waiters circulated with gleaming glasses, and business executives from across the country gathered under white tents with a privileged view of the ocean. This wasn't just any event. It was the consecration of Ethan Mitchell as the young prodigy of the American hotel industry. At 35, Ethan represented everything the new generation of American entrepreneurs aspired to be. The only son of Richard Mitchell, a real estate magnate, he had transformed his family's assets into an empire of luxury resorts that stretched across the entire California coastline. The Ocean View Resort Malibu, with its 300 ocean-facing rooms and architecture that blended sustainability with opulence, was his masterpiece. "Mr. Mitchell, the press is waiting for the official photos." Ashley Parker, his personal assistant, approached discreetly, adjusting the earpiece that kept the entire team connected. "5 minutes, Ashley. I need to check the details of the main deck." Ethan adjusted his Italian silk tie and took a deep breath. His face, sculpted in precise angles, revealed none of the fatigue from the sleepless nights dedicated to the final preparations. Success had a price, and he paid it with loneliness disguised as independence. His relationships, all superficial, lasted exactly the length of a launch or a season. In the main hall, the state governor chatted animatedly with tourism industry executives. Food critics sampled canapés signed by the French chef hired at a premium. Digital influencers captured every Instagrammable angle of the space. The chamber orchestra played softly, creating the perfect atmosphere of unpretentious sophistication. "Everything is absolutely perfect," Ethan murmured to himself as he walked toward the marble deck that projected over the white sand of Paradise Cove Beach. That's when he spotted something out of place. A small figure contrasting with the impeccable scenery. A girl no more than 7 years old, wearing a simple, worn dress, walking barefoot among the guests. The strangest thing, no one seemed to notice her. It was as if she were invisible to everyone except Ethan. The child held a paper in her hand, something that looked like a damp flyer. Her eyes, large and dark, fixed on Ethan's with a disconcerting intensity. There was no fear or hesitation in that gaze, only a silent determination that left him momentarily without reaction. How did she get in here, he thought, looking around for the security guards who rigorously controlled access to the event. The girl walked directly toward him, navigating around guests as if she knew the way. When she was just a few steps away, Ethan noticed that she was trembling slightly, despite the warmth of the summer evening. "You need to come with me," she said, with a small but firm voice. "Please." Ethan looked around, uncomfortable. 2 security guards had already noticed the child's presence and were approaching with determined expressions. "It's okay," he signaled to them with a discreet gesture. Turning to the girl, he asked softly, "What's your name? Where are your parents?" "Emma," she replied, ignoring the second question. "You need to help. She's too weak." Before Ethan could question who she was, Emma extended the crumpled flyer. It was promotional material for the resort, with Ethan's face on the cover, alongside the slogan, "Unforgettable Experiences." "Where did you get this?" he asked, taking the paper. "I came to find you," Emma replied with disconcerting simplicity. "She showed me your face, said you would help." Something in the child's determination made Ethan hesitate. Years of business training had taught him never to show uncertainty, but there was something about this situation that escaped any protocol. "Ashley," he called his assistant through the communicator, "I need to handle an unexpected situation. Delay the speech by 15 minutes. 15 minutes? Impossible, Ethan. The governor has a schedule, and the live broadcast is already programmed," Ashley protested. 20 minutes, then," he replied with the firmness of someone who wasn't asking but informing. He turned off the communicator before hearing the response. Emma extended her small, cold hand. Without exactly understanding why, Ethan accepted it. The girl led him away from the buzz of the party, crossing the illuminated gardens toward the back parking lot where the staff cars were. "Where are we going, Emma?" he asked, beginning to reconsider his decision. "She's in the car." She couldn't get any closer. The parking lot was partially illuminated. Rows of modest vehicles contrasted with the luxury cars parked in the VIP area. Emma led him to an old sedan, a 90s model, parked in the most distant area, almost at the boundary with the native vegetation. As they approached, Ethan noticed that the car seemed to vibrate subtly, as if the engine were running on idle. Emma released his hand and ran to the vehicle, opening the passenger door. "She's here," she called, urgency in her voice. Ethan approached cautiously. Leaning to look inside the car, he felt the impact of the sight like a punch to the stomach. Reclined in the passenger seat with weak and irregular breathing was a woman. The blonde hair, now disheveled, framed a pale face that he knew all too well. Olivia. The name escaped his lips like a forgotten prayer. Olivia Reynolds. The woman he had loved intensely during college. The woman who disappeared without explanation 5 years ago, leaving only a void that no professional success had been able to fill. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. Ethan gently touched her face, feeling the cold, damp skin. "What happened to her?" he asked Emma, without taking his eyes off Olivia. "She used all the strength she had to get here," Emma replied, with a wisdom that seemed out of place in someone so young. "To bring me to you." Ethan removed his jacket and covered Olivia, while pulling his phone from his pocket. "I need an ambulance, immediately. Discreet access through the back of the resort," he ordered his head of security. "And Ashley, cancel my speech. Say I had a family emergency." While they waited for the ambulance, Ethan held Olivia's hand, feeling the weak pulse under his fingers. Emma observed attentively, sitting in the back seat of the car. "Are you her daughter?" Ethan asked, finally processing the resemblance between the girl's eyes and Olivia's. Emma just nodded, without offering further explanation. Her eyes, however, contained a silent question that Ethan wasn't prepared to answer. Sirens approached discreetly. Paramedics transferred Olivia to the ambulance with professional efficiency. As Ethan prepared to follow them, he felt Emma's hand hold his again. "She said you would help," the girl repeated with absolute confidence. "Said you were the only one who could." In that moment, under the starry Malibu sky, with the distant sounds of the party celebrating his empire, Ethan Mitchell felt the weight of those words. Something greater than himself was unfolding, something that no amount of money or business power could control. "Come on," he said to Emma, helping her into the ambulance. "Let's stay with her." As the ambulance pulled away from the back of the resort, Ethan looked back one last time. The lights of the event shone against the night sky, like artificial stars. Somehow, he knew that nothing would be the same again. Pacific Heights Medical Center, in the upscale area of Malibu, wasn't accustomed to receiving late-night visits with the discretion requested by Ethan Mitchell. The medical team was quickly mobilized, and Olivia was taken to a private suite on the top floor. Emma didn't leave her mother's side, holding her hand throughout the transfer process and initial examinations. "The condition is one of severe dehydration and exhaustion," explained Dr. Megan Taylor, while checking Olivia's vital signs. "She also shows signs of malnutrition and prolonged stress. Can you give us any information about her medical history?" Ethan hesitated. What could he say? That Olivia had disappeared 5 years ago without a trace, that everything he knew about her belonged to a life that seemed to have existed in another universe. "I don't have recent information," he replied cautiously, "but I can provide whatever is necessary for her treatment." The doctor nodded, accustomed to the discretion required by high-profile patients. "We'll keep her under observation and begin intravenous rehydration. The complete tests will be ready by morning," she explained, adjusting the IV. "Is the girl her daughter?" Ethan looked at Emma, who remained seated beside the bed, attentively observing every movement of the medical team. There was something in the child's posture, a mixture of vulnerability and strength that deeply disconcerted him. "Yes," he answered, realizing he wasn't absolutely certain, but feeling it was the correct response. When they were finally alone in the room, with Olivia asleep under the effect of mild sedatives, Ethan sat in a chair near the bed. Emma remained in the same place like a small sentinel. "You must be hungry," said Ethan, realizing that hours had passed since he found her at the resort. Emma shook her head negatively, but her stomach betrayed her with an audible growl. A small smile, the first Ethan had seen on her face, appeared timidly. "I'll order something for you to eat," he said, picking up the phone. "What do you like?" "Anything," Emma replied, her voice low. "But I don't want to leave here." "You don't have to leave. We can eat right here." While they waited for the meal, Ethan observed Emma more attentively. Her brown hair, with golden highlights like Olivia's, was tied in a poorly made braid. The simple dress was clean, despite being visibly worn. There were no signs of mistreatment, only of a life lived with limited resources. "Emma, can you tell me what happened to your mother? How did you get to the resort?" The girl looked at Olivia before answering, as if seeking permission. "Mummy said we needed to find you. She had your picture," she explained, pointing to the crumpled flyer that now rested on the bedside table. "We traveled for a long time. By bus, sometimes hitchhiking. Mommy ran out of strength near the end." "Where did you come from?" asked Ethan, trying to piece together the puzzle. "From many places. We never stayed long anywhere." The answer, though vague, carried the weight of a life in constant motion. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest, imagining Olivia and Emma wandering without a certain destination. "And your father? Is he—" "I don't have a father," Emma interrupted, with the brutal simplicity of children. "Just Mommy." The meal arrived, sandwiches, juice, and a chocolate dessert. Emma ate with contained appetite, like someone who had learned to value each meal. While eating, she took a small sketchbook from her dress pocket, placing it carefully beside her plate. "Do you like to draw?" asked Ethan, trying to establish a connection. Emma nodded, opening the sketchbook. The pages were filled with surprisingly detailed drawings for a child her age. Landscapes, houses, beaches, and mountains followed one another, like a visual diary of a journey. "These are the places where we've been," she explained, slowly turning the pages. Ethan recognized some of the landscapes: the Sierra Nevada, beaches that appeared to be from the California coast, fields that resembled the inland valleys. The last drawing showed the Ocean View Resort, with its modern lines against the orange sky. "How did you manage to draw the resort so well?" he asked, impressed with the precision. "Mommy had photos in the newspaper, in the magazine," Emma replied, closing the sketchbook. "She always kept them." A nurse entered to check Olivia's vital signs, interrupting the conversation. Ethan took the opportunity to check the messages on his phone. Dozens of notifications from Ashley and other Ocean View Group executives questioned his sudden disappearance from the inauguration. The press was speculating about a possible health issue. "Mr. Mitchell," the nurse called softly, "the patient is stable but will need absolute rest for at least 48 hours. You should go home to rest too. We can arrange accommodations for the girl." "I'm not leaving here," interrupted Emma with the same determination she had shown at the resort. "We'll stay," decided Ethan. "Please bring a sofa bed or whatever is necessary." When the nurse left, silence returned to the room, filled only by the constant beep of the monitors. Emma went back to sitting beside her mother, holding her hand with delicacy. "Eth," Olivia suddenly murmured, without opening her eyes. The nickname, which only Olivia used, hit Ethan like a wave. Memories that he had carefully stored in some distant compartment of his mind erupted to the surface. Sunday afternoons in the small apartment they shared during college, Olivia painting while he studied architectural projects, plans whispered between kisses about the future they would build together. Emma was attentively observing Ethan's reaction, her dark eyes recording every micro-expression. "She calls you that when she's dreaming," said the girl. "Eth." Something in the way Emma pronounced the nickname made Ethan feel a shiver down his spine. There was a familiarity, an echo of Olivia in that childish voice. "Emma, how old are you?" he asked, feeling his heart accelerate. "I'll be 5 in August," she replied, looking at him directly. "The 10th. Ethan made a quick mental calculation. If Emma would turn 5 in August, that meant she had been conceived shortly before Olivia's disappearance. The implications of that information hit him with full force. "Your mother, does she talk about me?" Emma hesitated, as if carefully weighing what she could reveal. "She tells stories about the architect prince who built real castles." The title of a senior thesis that Ethan had presented in college, "Contemporary Castles, Luxury Architecture as Cultural Expression." Olivia had been the only person to read the initial draft. "And what else does she tell you?" he asked, his voice slightly trembling. "That one day we would find you, that you would understand, that you would help." Emma opened her sketchbook again, turning to the last page. There, a drawing different from the others, 3 figures holding hands in front of the sea. A woman, a man, and a small child between them. In the sky, a bright sun radiated rays that touched the 3 figures. "It's us," explained Emma, pointing to the drawing. "Mommy, me, and you, a family." The word family echoed in the quiet room as if it had been pronounced through a megaphone. Ethan felt the world spin around him, all his certainties crumbling like a sandcastle hit by the tide. "Mr. Mitchell!" Dr. Taylor's voice brought him back to reality. She had entered the room without him noticing. "Can we talk for a minute outside?" In the corridor, away from Emma's ears, the doctor spoke in a professional tone, but with evident concern. "The preliminary results of the tests indicate a more complex condition than it appears. Besides physical exhaustion, the patient shows signs of post-traumatic stress and possible exposure to substances that may have temporarily affected her cognitive functions." "What kind of substances?" asked Ethan, feeling his throat dry. "We can't specify without more detailed tests, but the pattern suggests long-duration sedatives, the type used in intensive psychiatric treatments." "Olivia had no psychiatric history," protested Ethan. "The most concerning," continued the doctor, "are marks of restraint on her wrists and ankles, old but visible. Mr. Mitchell, I need to ask, do you have any knowledge that this woman might have been institutionalized against her will?" The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Ethan felt his blood freeze in his veins. "No," he finally answered, "but I'm going to find out exactly what happened." Upon returning to the room, he found Emma asleep in the chair beside Olivia's bed. Careful not to wake her, he covered her with a light blanket. His gaze then turned to Olivia, observing the face that had haunted his dreams for 5 long years. "What did they do to you?" he whispered, lightly touching the golden hair spread over the white pillow. "And why?" As an answer, only the soft sound of Olivia and Emma's breathing synchronized in their sleep, as if they were one person divided into 2 bodies. Mother and daughter. Possibly his daughter too. Ethan took his phone from his pocket and typed a message to Ashley. "Cancel all appointments for the next few days, urgent family matter, no contact with the press." Then, on impulse, he opened the photo gallery and found a folder protected by password. Olivia, 2020. The password, which he had never forgotten. August 10, the day they met. The photos showed moments of a happiness that seemed to have belonged to someone else, in another life. Olivia smiling on the beach, Olivia concentrated on her paintings, Olivia asleep with a book on her chest. The contrast between those images and the fragile woman in the hospital bed was devastating. Something or someone had stolen 5 years of Olivia's life, and apparently had also stolen Ethan's opportunity to know his own daughter. Morning arrived with the soft clarity that only Malibu could offer, filtering through the blinds of the hospital room. Ethan awoke in the uncomfortable chair, feeling every muscle protest. Emma was already awake, silently organizing her colored pencils and sketchbook. "Good morning," he said, trying to smile despite the fatigue. "She woke up twice," informed Emma, pointing to Olivia, "but went back to sleep quickly." Ethan checked his phone, 37 missed calls, 52 unread messages. The outside world continued spinning, demanding explanations he wasn't prepared to give. A message from his father, Richard Mitchell, stood out among the others. "We need to talk about your irresponsible behavior. I'm heading to Malibu." Putting the phone back in his pocket, Ethan approached the bed. Olivia seemed less pale, her breathing more regular. The fragility of the previous night was giving way to subtle signs of recovery. "I'll get breakfast for us," he said to Emma. "Do you want to come with me, or prefer to stay here?" "I'll stay with Mommy," she replied, without hesitation. In the corridor, Ethan met Dr. Taylor, who updated him on Olivia's condition. Her vital signs had stabilized, but she would still need a few days of complete recovery. "And what about the substances you mentioned yesterday?" "The toxicology tests aren't complete yet, but we confirmed the presence of residues of long-duration benzodiazepines. These are controlled medications, Mr. Mitchell, used for deep sedation." Ethan felt his stomach turn. Could this have been administered against her will? Unfortunately, yes, especially considering the restraint marks. On his way to the cafeteria, Ethan made a decision. He called Michael Bennett, his personal lawyer and friend from college days, one of the few who knew his history with Olivia. "I need you to come to Pacific Heights Medical Center immediately," he said as soon as Michael answered, "and bring your contact at the FBI. I don't trust the local police for this." "Ethan, what are you talking about? Is everything okay?" "Olivia is back, Michael, and she wasn't alone." The silence on the other end of the line was eloquent. Michael had witnessed Ethan's suffering after Olivia's disappearance, had accompanied the fruitless searches, the private detectives who found nothing. "I'm on my way," he finally replied. 1 hour. Maximum. Back in the room, with a complete breakfast for Emma, Ethan found a scene he hadn't expected. Olivia was sitting up in bed, conscious, talking quietly with her daughter. When she saw him, her eyes, those blue eyes that had haunted his dreams for years, widened in a mixture of relief and fear. "Ethan." Her voice was just a whisper. "You really came." He approached cautiously, as if fearing she might disappear again if he made a sudden movement. "I'm here, Olivia. We're safe here." She looked around, checking the windows, the door, as if looking for invisible threats. Emma held her hand, a gesture that seemed part of an established routine to calm her. "We can't stay long," murmured Olivia. "They always find a way." "Who, Olivia? Who's looking for you?" Before she could answer, the door opened. The nurse entered to check vital signs, followed by Ashley, Ethan's assistant, who appeared without warning. "Mr. Mitchell, excuse the intrusion," said Ashley, visibly uncomfortable with the situation she found. "But you're not answering calls, and the situation at the resort is—" She stopped upon noticing Olivia in the bed, and Emma at her side. Her gaze lingered on the girl's features, then returned to Ethan in a silent question. "Ashley, this isn't a good time," said Ethan firmly. "Please cancel all my appointments for the next few days. Your father is on his way to Malibu," informed Ashley, maintaining professionalism despite her evident curiosity. "He wants an emergency meeting with the board. Something about erratic behavior and rash decisions." Olivia visibly shrank at the mention of Richard Mitchell. Her face, which was beginning to regain color, paled again. "Tell him I'm unavailable," replied Ethan, noticing Olivia's reaction. "Family matters take priority now." When Ashley left, Olivia grabbed Ethan's arm with surprising strength. "Your father can't know we're here," she said, urgency in her voice. "Please, Ethan." "Olivia, what's going on? What does my father have to do with this?" She looked at Emma, who was drawing tranquilly, apparently oblivious to the tension in the room. "Not here," whispered Olivia. "Not in front of her. She's already seen too much." Before Ethan could insist, Michael Bennett arrived, accompanied by a middle-aged woman with a military posture whom he introduced as Agent Sarah Johnson of the FBI. "We need to talk privately," said Sarah after the introductions. "There are serious accusations being made, and we need to establish the facts." Emma refused to leave her mother's side, and after some negotiation, they agreed that the girl could stay, as long as she used headphones with music while the adults talked. Reluctantly, she accepted the arrangement. With Emma entertained with a tablet and headphones, Olivia began to speak. Her voice, initially hesitant, gained strength as the narrative progressed. "It all started when I discovered I was pregnant," she said, looking at Emma with infinite love in her eyes. "We were graduating. You had just received the proposal to take on the first big project at the Ocean View Group. I was going to tell you that night." Her voice faltered as she recalled. "But before that, I received a visit at the studio, Richard Mitchell in person offering coffee." Ethan felt his blood freeze in his veins. "My father went to see you." Olivia nodded. "He said he knew about the pregnancy, that he had sources at the lab where I took the test. He offered money for me to solve the problem and disappear from your life." "I never knew about this," murmured Ethan, stunned. "Of course not. When I refused, he changed tactics, said you already knew about the pregnancy, that we had talked and you didn't want the baby or a serious relationship with me, that you had bigger plans." Agent Johnson was taking detailed notes, her professional face masking any personal reaction to the story. "I didn't believe him," continued Olivia. "I knew you too well, but he seemed so sure. He said he would give me time to think about the proposal, left a card with a number for me to call when I came to my senses." Olivia paused, taking a sip of water that Michael offered. "That night, when I returned to the apartment, I found 2 women waiting for me. They said they were social workers, that they had received an anonymous complaint about my unstable mental state, that I represented a risk to myself and to others. They used the pregnancy against you," concluded Sarah, with the neutral voice of a professional accustomed to hearing atrocities. "They took me to a private clinic on the outskirts of Santa Barbara, Pinewood Retreat, on paper a treatment center for psychiatric disorders. In practice, Olivia visibly shuddered. A place where inconvenient people disappear. Ethan felt anger grow inside him like a storm. How long were you there? Until Emma's birth. After that, things got confusing. Constant medication, days that merged together. A nurse, Lisa, was the only one who showed compassion. She was the one who helped me escape with Emma when my daughter was almost 2 years old. Agent Johnson interrupted for the first time. Do you have proof of these accusations? Records? Documents? Olivia shook her head negatively. Only what's in my memory, and some drawings I made in secret. And this? She reached for the small backpack that Emma had brought, removing a silver locket. Upon opening it, she revealed a tiny photo. Olivia pregnant, in an austere room, with a date stamped in the corner. Lisa took it secretly and gave it to me before we escaped. She said one day I might need to prove what happened. Ethan recognized the locket. It had been a gift from him to Olivia, originally containing a photo of them together on the beach. For the past 3 years, we've lived in constant movement, continued Olivia. Small towns, temporary jobs, always using false names. But I felt they were getting closer. Twice we had to flee in the middle of the night when suspicious cars started circulating around the neighborhood. And how did you find me? Asked Ethan. I saw the resort advertisement in a magazine a few months ago. Your face was there along with the inauguration date. I knew it was our chance. We gathered what little money we had and came to Malibu, but when we arrived I was already... She made a vague gesture, indicating her debilitated state. Mommy was sleeping a lot, added Emma, who had removed her headphones without anyone noticing. I kept the paper with your face. I knew I needed to find you. Agent Johnson closed her notebook. This is enough for us to initiate a formal investigation. I'll need detailed testimonies, and we'll verify the existence of this Pinewood retreat. It exists, confirmed Michael, consulting his tablet. Officially registered as a high-complexity psychiatric treatment center, administered by a foundation linked to the Ocean View Health Group. The revelation fell like a bomb in the quiet room. Ethan rose abruptly, walking to the window. A subsidiary I never managed, he said, his voice laden with contained anger. It was always under my father's direct control. Olivia extended her hand to Emma, who returned to her side on the bed. All this time, I thought I was protecting our daughter from a distant danger, said Olivia, with tears in her eyes. I never imagined the danger could be so close to you. Daughter, repeated Ethan, the word sounding strange and at the same time perfectly natural on his lips. Is she really... Yours, completed Olivia, with a small, sad smile. Look at her, Ethan. Look at her eyes, at the way she furrows her brow when she's concentrating. She has your nose, you know, and the same habit of organizing everything by colors. Emma was observing the conversation with characteristic intensity, her eyes, Ethan's eyes, moving between her mother's face and that of the man who had just discovered he was her father. Can I show you something? Asked Emma, opening her sketchbook to the last page. It was a drawing different from the others, made with more delicate strokes. It showed a baby wrapped in a blue blanket, sleeping. Beside it, a text written in a child's careful handwriting. Emma Reynolds Mitchell. Mommy taught me to write my full name, she explained with pride, so I would never forget who I am. Ethan felt the tears he had held back for so long finally overflow. 5 years lost, a daughter who grew up without knowing him, Olivia prisoner in a nightmare orchestrated by his own father. We need to keep them safe, he said, turning to the agent and to Michael. Richard can't know we were here. I'm already arranging the transfer to a secure location, assured Sarah, and a team is on its way to Pinewood Retreat for a surprise inspection. While the others discussed logistics and security, Ethan sat on the edge of the bed beside Olivia and Emma. With hesitation, he extended his hand to touch his daughter's face. Emma didn't recoil. On the contrary, she leaned slightly toward the touch, like a plant seeking the sun. Do you believe us? Asked Olivia, her voice laden with vulnerability. I believe you. I always believed, replied Ethan, and I'm going to fix this. I promise. Emma took Ethan's hand and Olivia's, uniting them on the white hospital blanket. The gesture, simple and powerful, sealed a silent promise between the three. Outside, the Malibu sky was beginning to cloud over, announcing a summer storm. In the hospital room, another storm was forming, one determined to sweep away years of lies and separation at any cost. The transfer to the safe house on the outskirts of Malibu occurred during the early morning hours. A discreet residence in a gated community, protected by federal agents disguised as ordinary security guards. Olivia was still weak, but the determination in her eyes grew with each hour she spent away from the shadows that had pursued her for years. Emma adapted with surprising ease to the new environment. On the small back porch, with a view of a well-maintained garden, she had created a space to draw. Her strokes now had more vibrant colors, as if the momentary safety allowed her imagination to finally expand. "Has she always drawn?" Ethan asked Olivia, watching their daughter absorbed in her new work. "Since she could hold a pencil," Olivia replied, with a soft smile. "In the most difficult times, when we didn't have paper, she would draw in the sand on beaches or on dirt ground. I think it was the way she found to process everything that was happening." Ethan felt the weight of those words. Emma had spent most of her short life on the run, deprived of stability, security, and the presence of a father who didn't even know of her existence. "We're going to fix this," he promised, more to himself than to Olivia. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Michael Bennett, his lawyer. "You need to come to the office now," said Michael without preamble. "Your father is here with 2 corporate lawyers. They're talking about legal guardianship, due to erratic behavior and risk to the family business." Ethan felt his blood boil in his veins. Guardianship? Is he really trying to declare me incompetent? It's a preventive move. He knows something is happening, but not exactly what. We're keeping the investigation into Pinewood Retreat absolutely confidential, but he must have noticed the movement. Olivia, who was listening to the conversation, touched Ethan's arm with apprehension. "Everything will be fine," he assured her, covering her hand with his. "Agent Johnson guaranteed that you're protected here. I'll resolve this and be back soon." On the way to the law office in downtown Malibu, Ethan received another call, this time from Agent Johnson. "We have news about Pinewood Retreat," she informed him. "The inspection revealed serious irregularities. We found records of patients who officially don't exist, including Olivia Reynolds. There's evidence of involuntary commitments without legal support. And my father. Is there proof of his involvement? We're still connecting the dots, but we found significant financial transfers from the Ocean View Foundation to the retreat, and more importantly, an employee named Lisa Cooper confirmed Olivia's story. She kept a detailed diary of everything she witnessed over the past 6 years. A thread of hope lit up inside Ethan. "Is this enough for a formal accusation?" "We're building the case," Sarah replied with professional caution. "But I need to warn you, your father has powerful connections. This goes beyond a simple family dispute." The building that housed Michael Bennett's office occupied an entire floor in a corporate tower with a view of the Pacific. Upon entering the conference room, Ethan found exactly what he expected. Richard Mitchell, impeccable in his Italian suit, flanked by 2 corporate lawyers with grave expressions. Michael waited standing, visibly tense. "Finally decided to honor us with your presence," said Richard without rising. The controlled voice, the same tone he used in difficult negotiations. "We were discussing your future." "My future," replied Ethan, remaining standing. "Interesting that you mentioned this, Father. I've also been thinking a lot about the past recently." Richard made a gesture, dismissing the lawyers and Michael. "Leave us alone, please. Family matter." When the door closed, Richard's calculated smile disappeared. "What game are you playing, Ethan? You abandon the most important inauguration of the year, disappear for days, ignore the board, and now I hear rumors about federal agents asking questions about our subsidiaries." Ethan placed his hands on the table, leaning to face his father directly. "I'm not playing, Father. I'm finally seeing the complete board. Olivia Reynolds is alive, and my daughter too." Richard's face remained impassive, but something in his eyes faltered for a second, so brief that most people wouldn't have noticed. But Ethan knew that look all too well. "So that's it," said Richard, leaning back in his chair. "She finally reappeared with some fanciful story and some child, probably not even yours. I always knew that artist had a long-term plan. An artist you had forcibly committed to a clandestine psychiatric clinic for years. A woman you tried to bribe to abort my daughter. A mother you separated from me with lies." Richard let out a dry laugh, devoid of humor. "What a creative story. Let me guess. She told you all this with tears in her eyes, perfectly playing the victim role. I have proof, Father. documents from Pinewood Retreat, employee testimonies, financial transfers from the Ocean View Foundation. The FBI has everything. For the first time, Ethan saw something he never imagined seeing on his father's face: fear. It was just a flash, quickly replaced by the usual mask of control, but it was there. "You don't know what you're getting into," said Richard, his voice lower. "Some decisions are made for the greater good, for the good of the family, of the legacy we've built." "What legacy, father? An empire built on lies, on destroyed lives." Richard stood up, walking to the panoramic window that offered a privileged view of the city. "When your mother left me with a small child to find herself in India, I swore that nothing would ever threaten what we built together. The Ocean View Group was small then, just 3 mid-sized hotels. I worked every minute of every day to transform it into what it is today. And that justifies what you did to Olivia?" Richard turned, his eyes now cold as the winter sea. "She was going to ruin everything. An art student with no name, no connections, pregnant in your last year of college. You had just received the proposal to lead the Monterey project, your first big step. Were you going to throw everything away for a youthful passion?" "It wasn't your decision to make," replied Ethan, feeling his anger grow. "It was my life, my choice." "Choices have consequences, son. Consequences that extend for generations. If you had thrown your career away at that moment because of her, we wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't have built all this." Ethan shook his head, incredulous at his father's coldness of reasoning. "And what happened after she refused the money? You simply decided to make her disappear. I gave her a choice. She chose the hard way. You kidnapped her. You kept her drugged in a clinic while she gave birth to my daughter, for years." Richard sighed, like an impatient teacher with a student who doesn't understand a simple concept. The initial intention was to keep her only until the birth. The child would be sent for adoption to a good family, and Olivia would be released with a sufficient amount to start over far from here. A clean deal without traces. "So what went wrong in your perfect plan?" asked Ethan, his voice trembling with anger. "She refused to sign the adoption papers. She insisted that you had the right to know, that the girl was a Mitchell. It became complicated." The casualness with which Richard described the systematic destruction of Olivia's life made Ethan feel nauseous. "And you simply continued keeping her imprisoned year after year. The doctors assured it was just a matter of time until she gave in. And then that nurse interfered. When we discovered the escape, it was too late. They had completely disappeared." Ethan stared at the man before him, the father he had idolized throughout his life, the mentor who had shaped his career, the figure who represented everything he aspired to be. Now he saw only a stranger, a man capable of justifying atrocities in the name of the greater good. "You stole 5 years of my life with my daughter," said Ethan, his voice low and dangerous. "You stole Olivia's freedom, all for control, for your distorted vision of legacy." "I did what was necessary," replied Richard, without remorse in his voice, "and I would do it again if needed." "Well, now it's my turn to do what's necessary," said Ethan, heading for the door. "From today on, I no longer have a father." Richard gave a dry laugh, melodramatic as always. "You think you can just walk away? The board is already being notified about your unstable behavior. I have medical statements suggesting acute stress and possible breakdown. By the end of the day, you'll be temporarily removed from the presidency of the group." Ethan stopped with his hand on the doorknob, turning to face his father one last time. "You still don't understand, do you? I no longer care about the presidency, about the group, about the empire you built. I found something infinitely more valuable." "Don't be naive," retorted Richard. "Without the Mitchell name, without the power of the group, what are you? Just another mediocre architect with grandiose ideas." "Maybe," replied Ethan with a small smile. "But I'll be a mediocre architect who doesn't need to destroy lives to feel powerful. And above all, I'll be the father Emma deserves." The moment Ethan left the room, his phone vibrated with a message from Michael. "Pinewood documentation delivered to the FBI. Search and seizure warrant for the Ocean View Foundation offices issued. We're moving forward." In the elevator, Ethan rested his forehead against the cold mirror wall, letting the adrenaline of the confrontation diminish. For years he had built his identity around the Mitchell surname and everything it represented. Now he needed to rediscover who he was without that anchor, and more importantly, who he could become for Olivia and Emma. Back at the safe house, he found Emma on the porch, still drawing. Upon seeing him, the girl raised her sketchbook, showing her newest creation, a colorful drawing of a house by the sea, with 3 figures holding hands on the porch. In the background, a rising sun spread golden rays across the sky. "It's our future house," she explained, with the absolute conviction that only children possess. "Mommy said that one day we would have a real house all together." "It's beautiful, Emma," replied Ethan, sitting beside her. "We can build it exactly like that if you want." "Do you promise?" she asked, his eyes, fixed on his face with that characteristic intensity. "I promise." Olivia appeared at the porch door, wrapped in a borrowed robe, her hair damp from a recent bath. Her body still showed signs of the long period of deprivation, but there was a new light in her eyes, the light of someone who can finally breathe without fear. "How did it go?" she asked, sitting on the other side of Emma. "He confessed everything," replied Ethan. "Not out of remorse, but out of arrogance. He believes he can still control the situation." "And can he?" "Not this time." Ethan extended his hand over Emma's shoulders, touching Olivia's face softly. "This time, we write the end of the story." Emma observed the interaction attentively, absorbing every gesture, every unspoken word between the adults. Then, with the disconcerting simplicity of children, she took her sketchbook and began a new drawing. "What are you drawing now?" asked Olivia, smiling at her daughter. "Our family," replied Emma, concentrated on her art. "Not the one from the past or the future, the one from now." 3 figures began to take shape on the paper, a large one, a medium one, and a small one, united by colorful lines that seemed to emanate from their bodies, intertwining like rays of light. In that moment, under the Malibu sky that was beginning to tinge with the colors of dusk, Ethan Mitchell understood that true architecture wasn't in the buildings he designed, but in the connections he built. And the most important work of his life was just beginning. The following days passed in an intense rhythm of formal testimonies, meetings with lawyers, and long sessions with the FBI team. The investigation into Pinewood Retreat was advancing rapidly, revealing a scheme much larger than just Olivia's case. Other families were beginning to emerge, similar stories of inconvenient people who had been removed through forced commitments. While the case gained larger proportions, Ethan faced his own internal battle at the Ocean View Group. As Richard had promised, the administrative board convened an extraordinary meeting to discuss his temporary removal. The official justification: erratic behavior potentially harmful to the company's interests. "You don't have to face this alone," said Olivia the night before the decisive meeting. Emma had already fallen asleep, exhausted after a day of exploring the small garden of the safe house, where she had discovered a family of turtles that immediately became the subject of her drawings. "I'm not alone," replied Ethan, holding her hand. They were sitting on the porch, sharing a bottle of wine, a small luxury that seemed extraordinary after so many days of tension. "For the first time in years, I'm really not alone." Olivia smiled, that smile he knew so well, the left corner of her mouth rising slightly more than the right, creating an enchanting asymmetry that he had tried to capture in countless sketches during his college years. "Still, facing your father and the entire board, it's your name, your career. A name that my father transformed into a synonym for power at any cost," said Ethan, looking at the stars that were beginning to appear in the dark sky. "Maybe it's time to build something different with that name. Or even a new name." Olivia looked at him with curiosity. "What do you have in mind?" "I don't know exactly yet, but I have some ideas." He paused, studying her face, the new expression lines, the small marks that the years of fleeing had left. "Did you continue painting during all this time?" A flash of sadness crossed Olivia's face. "Not exactly. In the retreat, they didn't allow anything that could be used as, well, as a weapon, I suppose. Not even colored pencils. After the escape, we rarely had time or resources for that. Teaching Emma to draw was my way of keeping that part of me alive." "She has your talent," observed Ethan, "the way she captures light, expressions, and your architectural precision," added Olivia. "Have you noticed how she always draws houses in perfect perspective, without ever having had a formal lesson? It's as if she inherited the best of both of us." The silence that followed was comfortable, filled only by the sound of distant waves and the occasional call of a night bird. For the first time in years, neither felt the need to fill the space with words. "I want you to be there tomorrow," said Ethan finally. "At the board meeting." Olivia widened her eyes, surprised. "Are you sure? Wouldn't that be like throwing gasoline on the fire?" "Precisely." Ethan smiled, a smile that combined determination and a spark of rebellion that Olivia recognized from their student days. "It's time to burn some bridges, to build others, better ones." The next morning, the Ocean View Group headquarters in Malibu gleamed under the summer sun, its glass facades reflecting the blue of the sky and sea. Ethan arrived accompanied not only by Michael Bennett, his lawyer, but also by Olivia and Emma. The girl, dressed in a new dress, the first Ethan had bought for her, firmly held the hands of both, as if fearing they might disappear if she let go. In the main lobby, employees and executives looked with poorly disguised curiosity at the quartet heading toward the private elevators. Rumors about the crisis at the top of the group had been circulating through the corridors for days. "Remember," said Michael, as they rode up to the executive floor, "legally, they can't permanently remove you without concrete evidence of mismanagement or irregularities. The most they can achieve is a temporary removal." "I'm not worried about that now," replied Ethan, looking at Emma, who was watching fascinated as the numbers on the digital panel changed. The boardroom was a monument to corporate opulence, a meeting table in noble wood that seated 20 people, Italian leather chairs, a panoramic view of the bay, and original works of art on the walls, including, Ethan noted with irony, a small canvas by Olivia from her student days, acquired at a charity auction years ago. Richard Mitchell was already there, seated at the head of the table, flanked by board members with grave expressions and lawyers in impeccable suits, his face visibly hardened upon seeing Olivia and Emma entering the room. "This is a private board meeting," he said with a controlled voice. "We don't allow the presence of strangers." "They're not strangers," replied Ethan, indicating that Olivia and Emma should sit beside him. "This is Olivia Reynolds, an artist and my partner, and this is Emma Reynolds Mitchell, my daughter. I believe the board should know the true reasons behind this extraordinary meeting." A murmur ran through the table. Some older board members exchanged significant looks, not of surprise, noted Ethan, but of recognition. The suspicion that had begun to form in his mind gained more strength. Some of them knew or at least suspected what Richard had done. "This is completely inappropriate," protested Richard. "We're here to discuss your management and recent behavior, not personal matters." "You're mistaken, Father," replied Ethan, keeping his voice calm. "We're here precisely because of personal matters. More specifically, we're here because you orchestrated the kidnapping and forced commitment of my daughter's mother for years, using Ocean View Group resources to finance this illegal operation." The silence that followed was deafening. Emma, sensing the tension, opened her sketchbook and began to scribble distractedly, as she always did when she needed to calm herself. Richard recovered quickly. "These are absurd and defamatory accusations. My son is clearly going through an episode of emotional instability, as we had already warned." "Perhaps this will help clarify things," intervened Michael Bennett, distributing folders to each board member. "Complete documentation of the ongoing investigation into Pinewood Retreat, including financial records of transfers from the Ocean View Foundation, employee testimonies, and falsified medical records." As the board members leafed through the material, expressions of shock and discomfort spread across the table. Richard remained impassive, though an attentive observer might notice the slight tremor in his right hand. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," continued Ethan, "for 5 years, Ocean View Group resources were diverted to finance a clandestine operation that kept Olivia Reynolds prisoner, separated from her daughter, my daughter, and from me. All because my father unilaterally decided that she represented a threat to the plans he had for me and for the group." One of the oldest board members, Paul Anderson, cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mr. Mitchell, Richard, these accusations are extremely serious. If confirmed, they constitute not only ethical violations, but serious crimes. This is a setup orchestrated by my son and this woman," replied Richard, the mask of control beginning to crack. "Probably in collusion with competitors who wish to destabilize the group." "The FBI disagrees," intervened Olivia, speaking for the first time since they entered the room. Her voice, though soft, carried a quiet strength, as do the other former patients of Pinewood Retreat, who are emerging with similar stories. People who, like me, represented inconveniences for powerful families. Emma, who seemed absorbed in her drawings, suddenly raised her head. "You're the bad man from Mommy's nightmares," she said, looking directly at Richard. There was no accusation in her childish voice, just the observation of an obvious fact. Richard visibly paled. For a moment, it seemed he would respond to the child, but he retreated, composing himself. "What exactly do you intend with this, theatrical presentation, Ethan?" he finally asked. Ethan took a deep breath before answering. The words he was about to pronounce had been carefully thought out during the previous night. "I'm here to present my irrevocable resignation from the position of president of the Ocean View Group and to sell all my shares in the company." A new murmur ran through the room. Even Michael seemed surprised. This part wasn't in the script they had discussed. "This is absurd," protested Richard. "You can't simply—" "I can and I will," interrupted Ethan. "The shareholders' agreement allows me to sell my shares at any time, as long as I first offer them to the controlling group. That is, to you, Father. Michael has already prepared all the necessary documentation, and if I refuse to buy, then the shares will go to the open market, probably with an attractive discount. I'm sure our competitors would be delighted with the opportunity." Richard narrowed his eyes, evaluating his son as if seeing him for the first time. "You would throw away the work of a lifetime because of a personal vendetta?" "It's not vengeance," replied Ethan, looking briefly at Olivia and Emma. "It's liberation. I'm choosing to build something new, something that isn't stained by lies and crimes." "And what would this something new be?" asked Richard, with barely disguised contempt. Ethan smiled, a genuine smile that surprised everyone in the room. "An institute for arts and shelter, for people who, like Olivia and Emma, had their lives interrupted by abuses of power. A place where talents can flourish without being suffocated by others' ambitions." Olivia looked at him with surprise and emotion. It was the first time she heard about this plan. "I'll use the capital from the sale of my shares to finance the project," continued Ethan. "And yes, Father, I'll also sue you and the Ocean View Group for moral and material damages on behalf of Olivia, Emma, and all the other victims of Pinewood Retreat. Every cent will be directed to the Institute." Emma, who had finished her drawing, gently pulled the sleeve of Ethan's shirt. When he leaned over, she showed him what she had created, a large, luminous building with colorful windows and people of all sizes around it. At the top, she had written in her childish handwriting, "Emma's Light Institute." "It's perfect," whispered Ethan, feeling his eyes moisten. Richard observed the interaction with an expression impossible to decipher, a mixture of anger, confusion, and perhaps a spark of what could be regret. "You're throwing away your future," he finally said. "Everything we built." "No, Father," replied Ethan, standing up and extending his hands to Olivia and Emma. "I'm finally starting to build something worth it." As the three walked toward the door hand in hand, Ethan briefly stopped and turned to the board. "Ladies and gentlemen, I suggest you initiate a complete and independent audit of the Ocean View Foundation's activities. What we've discovered so far may be just the tip of the iceberg. The FBI will certainly investigate everyone involved." Leaving behind the stunned silence of the boardroom, Ethan, Olivia, and Emma entered the elevator. When the doors closed, momentarily isolating them from the outside world, the three breathed in unison, as if, for the first time, the air was truly free. "Emma's Light Institute?" asked Olivia with a soft smile. "What do you think?" replied Ethan. "A space for artists like you, a safe place for children like Emma, a center that combines art, education, and shelter." "I can design the building," offered Emma, swaying slightly between the two. "I already have ideas." "I'm sure you do," replied Ethan, laughing softly, "and they'll be the best possible ideas." When the elevator reached the ground floor, the trio crossed the lobby under the curious gazes of employees. As they stepped out into the Malibu sunlight, Olivia paused for a moment, closing her eyes and breathing deeply. "So long," she murmured, more to herself than to the others. "So long afraid of open spaces, of being seen, of existing fully." Ethan gently squeezed her hand. "Now we can exist together, without fear." Emma, always attentive to the emotional nuances around her, looked at the blue sky and then at the adults' faces. "Can we go to the beach?" she asked with the disconcerting simplicity of children. "I've always wanted to build a real sandcastle." Olivia and Ethan exchanged glances over their daughter's head, glances that contained an entire universe of past pain and future hope. "Yes," replied Ethan, smiling. "Let's build the biggest sandcastle Malibu has ever seen." And so, Leaving behind the glass and concrete empire that had defined Ethan's life for so long, the three headed toward the sea, not as fugitives, not as victims, but as a finally reunited family, ready to build something genuinely their own. 1 year later, the late afternoon sun bathed the coastline of Pacific Beach with golden and orange tones, creating a spectacle of light that made the moment even more special. A small crowd gathered in front of a building with contemporary lines, harmoniously integrated into the natural landscape. Large colored windows filtered the setting sun's light, projecting a kaleidoscope onto the wooden floor of the spacious deck that extended toward the sand. Ethan Reynolds, who had officially adopted his partner's surname in a symbolic gesture of rebirth, adjusted the microphone on the small stage set up for the occasion. Wearing a white linen shirt and light pants, he looked younger and lighter than he ever had in his executive days. "Welcome to the official inauguration of Emma's Light Institute," he began, smiling at the diverse audience that gathered. Local artists, educators, families served by the project, municipal authorities and journalists. Exactly 1 year ago, a brave child found me at another kind of inauguration, very different from this one. She guided me not only to her mother but to my own humanity, which I had forgotten somewhere along the way. In the front row, Olivia smiled, radiant in a light blue dress that enhanced her now vibrant eyes. Beside her, Emma, now almost 6 years old, wore a flowery dress and firmly held a bouquet of sunflowers. Her eyes, identical to her father's, shone with expectation. "Emma's Light Institute is born from a story of separation and reunion," continued Ethan, "but also from a promise that no family should go through what we went through, that no economic or political power should override basic human rights, that every person deserves the chance to tell their own story." Olivia stood up, joining Ethan on the stage. Her transformation over the year was remarkable. Her body had regained health, her golden hair now shone under the sun, and most importantly, her eyes had recovered that spark of creativity and passion that had always characterized her. "When I was in my darkest moment," she said with a firm voice, "art saved me. Drawing with Emma, even in the most precarious conditions, was our way of preserving our humanity, of reminding ourselves who we were beyond fear and constant flight." In the audience, faces nodded in recognition. Many were survivors like her, people who had found in the Institute a space for healing and expression. "That's why the Institute has 3 fundamental pillars," explained Olivia. "Art as a tool for healing and expression, shelter for families in vulnerable situations, and advocacy to ensure that the abuses we suffered aren't repeated with others." Emma was called to the stage, bringing with her the first painting she had created in the Institute studio, an enlarged reproduction of the drawing she had shown Ethan on the day of the board meeting. The colorful building full of diverse people, now framed and destined to occupy a place of honor at the main entrance. "Emma wasn't just the inspiration for this place," said Ethan, placing his hand on his daughter's shoulder. "She was its spiritual architect. Every space here was conceived from her suggestions, from her drawings, from her vision of what a place of healing and creation should be." The girl, normally shy in public, surprised everyone by taking the microphone with confidence. "Thank you for coming," she said, with her clear, childish voice. "This place is for all children who need a home for their drawings and for their dreams." Warm applause followed her words. Among those present, some faces stood out. Michael Bennett, who had resigned from corporate law to lead the Institute's legal department. Agent Sarah Johnson, whose investigation had led to the shutdown of Pinewood Retreat and the preventive arrest of its administrators. And Lisa Cooper, the former nurse who had helped Olivia and Emma escape, now coordinator of the Institute's shelter program. Notably absent was Richard Mitchell. After the case was exposed, he had resigned from the presidency of the Ocean View Group and retreated to one of his properties abroad, while facing criminal and civil lawsuits. The empire he had built remained standing, but his reputation was irreparably tarnished. After the speeches, while guests explored the Institute's facilities, art studios, music rooms, therapeutic spaces, temporary lodgings for families in vulnerable situations, Ethan, Olivia, and Emma discreetly moved away toward the beach. Barefoot on the still warm sand, they walked to the water's edge where waves broke gently. The sky was beginning to be tinged with the first stars, while the sun disappeared on the horizon. "We did it," said Olivia, intertwining her fingers with Ethan's. "Sometimes I still can't believe all this is real." "I always knew it would be real," replied Emma, crouching to collect a perfect shell. "I drew it many times, remember?" Ethan smiled, observing the daughter who, in just 1 year of living together, had become the center of his universe. Her intelligence, sensitivity, and artistic talent flourished daily, as if the lost time was being compensated in an explosion of creativity and joy. "You know what else I drew many times?" continued Emma, looking at her parents with that characteristic intensity. "Our house, the one that would be next to the Institute." "And how is this house in your drawings?" asked Olivia, crouching to be at eye level with her daughter. "It has 3 bedrooms, one for you, one for me, and one for the baby," Emma replied naturally. Ethan and Olivia exchanged surprised looks. They had talked about expanding the family, but always in whispers, away from Emma's ears. "What baby?" asked Ethan, trying to keep his voice casual. Emma rolled her eyes with the typical exasperation of someone who needs to explain something obvious. "The baby growing in Mommy's tummy, of course." Olivia instinctively placed her hand on her belly. They had discovered the pregnancy just the week before and hadn't told anyone yet, much less Emma. How do you know that?" asked Olivia, astonished. "You make the same face you made when you ate something you didn't like when we were running away," explained Emma, with the impeccable logic of children. "And Daddy keeps looking at your tummy when he thinks nobody's watching." Ethan let out a laugh, pulling them both into a tight embrace. "I guess we'll never be able to hide anything from you, will we, little artist?" "No," agreed Emma, smiling. "I see everything, and I draw so I don't forget." Back at the Institute, the celebration continued. Several guests had gathered on the spacious terrace that projected over the beach, admiring the sky now sprinkled with stars. In the center of the space, a sculpture of glass and light created by Olivia captured and refracted the moonlight, a monument to resistance and transformation. In a quieter corner of the terrace, away from the main bustle, Ethan observed Olivia interacting with a group of young artists. Her animated face, the expressive gestures as she explained painting techniques, the sincere laughter that occasionally echoed in the night air, were constant reminders of the miracle they had experienced. Not just the reunion, but the complete reconstruction of a life that seemed irretrievably lost. Emma approached silently, holding her sketchbook, no longer the old worn notebook from the days of flight, but a professional sketchbook she had received for Christmas. "I made a new one," she said, showing the page to her father. The drawing showed the Institute seen from the beach, with the setting sun in the background. On the terrace, small figures represented the people at the party, and in the corner of the beach, 3 silhouettes holding hands observed the horizon. One large, one medium, and one small. "It's beautiful, Emma," said Ethan, marveling as always at his daughter's talent. "You captured the light of dusk perfectly." "I turned the page," she explained, doing exactly that. On the reverse, the same scene, but with a small difference. Now there were 4 silhouettes on the beach. The 4th, tiny one, appeared in the arms of the figure representing Olivia. "The future," Emma said simply, closing the sketchbook with an enigmatic smile. Olivia joined them, radiant after the conversation with the young artists. "What are you two conspiring about here in the corner?" "We were just admiring our daughter's visionary talent," replied Ethan, pulling her close. The party was beginning to wind down, guests saying goodbye, promising to return for the Institute's regular events. Soon only the permanent staff and some sheltered families would remain in the complex. "Shall we go home?" asked Olivia, observing Emma, who was beginning to show signs of fatigue despite her effort to remain alert and participative. "Home," repeated Ethan, savoring the word as if it were an exotic and delicious fruit. "I'm still surprised by the sound of that." The house they had built was a few minutes' walk along the beach, a simple and welcoming construction that, as Emma had predicted in her drawings, indeed had 3 bedrooms, the last recently transformed into a baby's room, with walls painted by Olivia in soft shades of green and blue, and a mobile of colorful birds created by Emma. Walking on the sand under the starry sky of Malibu, Ethan reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them there. From the cold, impersonal luxury of the Ocean View Resort to the warm simplicity of Emma's Light Institute. From loneliness disguised as independence to the genuine richness of reconstructed family bonds. From imposing structures designed to impress to the human architecture of healing and shelter. Emma walked a few steps ahead, occasionally stopping to collect shells or observe the movement of the waves. Olivia, with her hand resting gently on the belly where a new life was beginning to form, intertwined her fingers with Ethan's. "You know what I love most about this new life of ours?" she asked, breaking the contemplative silence. "What?" "The absence of fear," replied Olivia, with simplicity. "Going an entire day without looking over my shoulder, without planning escape routes, without rehearsing explanations and false stories, simply existing, breathing, creating." Ethan gently squeezed her hand. "I promise you'll never have to run or hide again." Emma had stopped a few meters ahead, drawing something in the sand with a stick. When they approached, they saw that it was the Institute symbol, a stylized sun with rays that transformed into brushes, pencils, and other artistic instruments. "So it's not washed away by the tide," she explained, with the seriousness that sometimes appeared on her childish face. "We need to redraw every day what we want to keep." Olivia and Ethan exchanged glances over their daughter's head, glances that contained an entire universe of mutual understanding, love, and admiration for the wisdom that sprouted from this extraordinary child. "Let's redraw together then," said Ethan, picking up another stick. "Every day for as long as necessary." As the stars shone over Malibu and the waves gently erased and renewed marks in the sand, the three, soon to be four, continued their path home. Not the physical house of wood and glass that awaited them further down the beach, but the true home they had built in each other, a refuge of love, understanding, and infinite possibilities.